This is session 3AW from GSE 2021, and it's roadmap to achieve full mobile to mainframe hybrid cloud visibility with Instana, or maybe you say it differently, Instana, whatever. We've all got our own ways of doing things like that. This session is given by Chris Walker. His email is there if you need to contact him. Please remember to do your feedback. Again, this is session 3AW. And also this year, really to show your appreciation of all the presentations that have been done and given. Please give generously to our charities this year, the RNLI and the Guide Dogs for the Blind. And your generosity may not go unrewarded, because you will also get a raffle ticket entry for each £1 that you donate. Questions, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and those will be answered at the end. And Chris, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Anna. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. My name's Chris Walker. I am a product manager at IBM. I'm responsible for multiple products, but the one I'm talking to you today is Instana on ZOS and around the area of application performance management in incorporating that into the mainframe. I've got a disclaimer here. I don't really anticipate talking about anything that's not generally available today, but if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them in terms of direction, roadmap, and strategy here. And so here's, I guess, the disclaimer to cover that. But otherwise, we'll be talking about what's available today. So today's session is really one that we've been able to present. Several we've presented over the last couple of weeks at GSE UK that focuses on the topic of observability. That's really about ensuring that, and also ensuring that the mainframe is part of that discussion and the implementation of a modern hybrid cloud infrastructure. So everything covering from customer-facing public cloud solutions that ultimately will drive transactions at the back end on your mainframe. Maybe it's driving something kicks that updates the DB2 table. So as I go through this, I'll touch on what I mean by observability, how we might consider that different to traditional monitoring, and I'll get on that a little bit later in the presentation. I don't know what everyone's background is here, but other than obviously you must work with the mainframe. So some of you may be specialists that use traditional monitoring tools today. Perhaps you have a more cross-domain application-centric view, which is increasingly common these days. And as we go through the session, we'll see that both roles really do exist today. They're both highly critical for the success of the business. And it's probably good within your organization to know who's doing these roles, to ensure that the mainframe is getting as much focus as other parts of the IT infrastructure. Given the value of the data and the workloads that are executed on the mainframe, that's absolutely vital. So just starting with this chart here, I just want to emphasize why observability is so important today. Firstly, and perhaps most importantly, it's critical to understand the impact that digital experiences have on an organization's bottom line. There's a quote that gets thrown around a lot. Every company is now a tech company, but there's a real element of truth to that. The digital marketplace has increased competition by several orders of magnitude and really shift the balance of power to consumers. So in every industry, every vertical, there's a variety of options for customers to choose from, which meaning, and one bad experience can be enough to drive a switch. Changing your bank account, changing who you want to buy certain products for, who you work with. Customers are really sensitive to slowdowns, outages, or even just hearing about these events in the news or on social media, and that may influence a future decision. Not to mention the fact that we're often more eager to share negative experiences with friends, families, and online than often, experiences that are good enough. So a lot of enterprises are making it their number one priority to monitor digital customer experience and performance because of its impact to the overall business. And so that has a real impact on the pressure that's put on IT operations teams as enterprises move quickly to enhance their app experience for the user, keep up with the competition. The technology stack that needs to be maintained grows larger and more complex, as you might see on the right here. There may be adoption of exciting new technologies like containers, orchestrators, microservices, serverless computing, and all of them bring with them unique monitoring challenges. More and more enterprises are embracing agile. They're also embracing the fact that you want to expose mainframe workloads, data to these new services using something like ZOS Connect to API enable this. And so that has a real drive in terms of the transactions that are getting pushed to the platform, and making them also less predictable as well. So what was a regular workload profile where you knew where the spikes were during the day or during the week, and you had the very predictable batch workload windows, now you may see spikes in performance or spikes in transactional requests that were not predicted in advance, and maybe in response to a weather event, a business-driven event, or something completely out of your control. And so this growth of things to track really generates a lot of data for a team of humans to manage, and it becomes clear that you need to have a much better way of staying on top of this. So this is just a very quick slide. Hopefully you heard that IBM made the major acquisition of Instana last year, late 2020. I'm not going to dwell on this, but the reason for IBM's reason for doing this is because of the reasons I just showed, that this digital businesses depend on the performance, availability of these critical business applications, and really having that view is important to manage that for your customers' expectation. So if you have heard of Instana, you may think of it as synonymous with application performance management, or APM, and that is very similar to monitoring capabilities as well. And that's true, but it's really only part of the story. When we talk about traditional monitoring, we think of resource tracking, availability, static alerting to tell you when there's something not right. And there's also been APMs, and they've been around for a while as well. They've really become far more essential over the past decade as systems become more interconnected. But in a lot of cases, some of the early implementations of APM solutions were very complex to set up, to instrument, to manage in order to get the right level of visibility. The later implementations of APM have really simplified this approach. And Instana is really expanding into what we would call enterprise observability. And that includes things such as automatically ingesting metrics and traces and events, and contextualizes all of those things such as the applications, the services, the interdependencies, so that teams have a much better level of visibility in terms of how the systems are performing, how the application is performing, and drill in and take intelligent action on any issue that might be there. So there's three key capabilities of an enterprise observability solution that are really key in if you want to think about if you have an observability solution. And I'm going to go into them in a little bit more detail over the next few minutes, but we'll split them into automation, real-time context, and providing intelligent action as we go through. So if we start with discovery automation, it becomes clear very quickly how important this is for the successful adoption of an APM or observability solution. As I've already mentioned, one pain point from early APM implementations was really the difficulty in configuring and instrumenting a solution. The result of that was that there was really a high cost in managing the software. There's a high risk that you have missed insights, or maybe problem identification takes a long time, and that's really negating the real solution, the real reason for adopting those solutions in the first place. So for an observability solution to really be successful today, it's important that there is no need to manually add, rewrite code in order to instrument this, really minimize and hopefully have no manual configuration required in order to identify things, and have a high level of confidence that you're not missing any monitoring coverage as you go through this. So you will be able to capture every metric, every second that's going on, so you don't miss those spikes when they occur, and you don't have any false positives or any of that visibility as well. So having complete visibility to every request without requiring code changes, without sampling, without partial traces, is really an essential part of a solution today. The second key capability I'll call real-time context. So in a hybrid cloud world, which is prevalent today, we know that there are physical and logical interdependencies between systems, subsystems, and different teams. Even within the mainframe, we've got different silos between people looking at networking, MQ, maybe KICS or IMS, and certainly the DBAs who are working with DB2. Understanding how everything fits together is really critical in determining where the problems are and detecting the problems and getting to the root cause quickly to solve them. If we think about how transactions flow once they arrive on the mainframe, there's several routes it could take. You could go through various different KICS regions, for example, and if you have nodes offline for maintenance, just when there's an unanticipated spike of transactions, it's important to know that context there. Where is the transactions being flowed to? Maybe there's nothing routed to subsystems which have spare excess capacity on the system, and that could really help us understand that there's a problem there. So the infrastructure layer remains a real critical part of the whole observability story, just as much as the application context. So we need to understand the entire stack. And some of the things that we can do here to help is really take a look at the infrastructure that goes through this. So dynamic graphing of how everything relates to each other as we flow through the system. Having a look at application perspectives, so having a view of the things that are important to you. There may be lots and lots of different services and applications that are being tracked, but obviously you want to filter out the noise there, so you can only you're only focusing on the things that impact your services, and the ability to logically group all those things together. So that you can easily visualize the services that you care about is also vital as well. And so finally, it's important to really have a level of derived intelligence, so we know when to take action in a timely fashion. So this is where techniques such as machine learning, looking at expected performance, and where we might detect anomalies within expected performance, can really help know when to take an action or when to actually start investigating something. So as we look for root causes, being able to identify those anomalies is vitally important. Traditionally, there's obviously a lot of dependency on static alerts that may have been created years ago, when the workload profile might be quite different to what we expect today. So these sometimes don't reflect the current state of the application, may require constant manual maintenance to remain valuable, or you end up with a situation where you have lots and lots of alerts popping all over the place, but you know which ones to avoid because, or to ignore, because you know that they just fire off all the time. So having the ability to create alerts based on a profile that has been built up over time is important. The ability to correlate alerts coming from multiple sources and have a clear view on incidents within an application view is really critical to know when you have a true bottleneck and problems. And that then should be able to help you get to the step of incident resolution through a single actionable alert with all the events correlated, pinpoint where the focus of investigation should be, and avoid those false positives that are out there. So just to jump back to really what Instana does here, Instana was developed as a real cloud native APM solution with coverage for a lot of the cutting edge technologies that are out there. All the major cloud providers, cloud virtualization platforms like Docker and Kubernetes, support for a lot of the different runtimes and messaging out there, and giving you the view across those applications within those environments. It is highly critical for most large organizations that we're also bringing the capability to align with some of the infrastructure that you will have running within your hybrid cloud environment, and that obviously does include the mainframe. So we've been working hard to tie that in so that the mainframe becomes part of that discussion as well. And the next few slides, I will talk a little bit around how and why mainframe integration into this story is so important. One thing has been very clear over the last few years is that APMs have been very focused on some of the cloud first technologies and some of those areas. And for a lot of our customers, we find that many of the popular APM tools really do lack support for the mainframe out of the box. This statistic here from Gartner is from the 2020 Magic Quadrant report, and they took a look at all of the ones that were appearing, the 15 offerings that were appearing on the Magic Quadrant, and it turns out that 13 of the 15 really did lack any support for the mainframe, and that's for a lot of customers a real significant piece of their infrastructure that's really missing. If you're trying to drive a full end-to-end visibility of your applications, that's a pretty significant gap, and I'll show you an example of what that gap looks like in a minute. So really, when it comes down to who's using APM tools such as Instana and where this fits with the mainframe story, there's a lot of people involved. Typically, a user of an APM solution might be an IT operations practitioner, sometimes called a site reliability engineer, maybe a application owner. These are the people responsible for the overall health of an application. They use the APM tool to have a view across all the different interrelated bits and pieces that have to work together to keep the services and applications running. Often these people do have very little mainframe awareness or understanding, and for the sake of our example here, they might be using Instana as their APM tool. On the mainframe side, which may be more familiar to most people on the call here, is our real mainframe subject matter expert, they're responsible for all or part of the mainframe infrastructure. They may specialize in key subsystems like IMS or KICS. And I'm showing a, Jim is using an Omegamon screen here. Maybe a variety of other monitoring tools that they're using to do this. And they will be looking at the availability and looking at a lot of the details within those particular infrastructure or system details. So if you're looking at KICS, looking at the transaction rates that are going through, whether the KICS is short on storage, all the different attributes that make up a healthy or problematic KICS region. So you can see these personas use quite different tooling, and beyond these tools, they may have also different skill sets. And often in large organizations, these people may not even be in the same office. They may not even be in the same country. We often find when we're talking about APM solutions and traditional mainframe monitors and subject matter experts, there's often a gap between the two teams, and they may never have actually met. And we've had calls where we've been working with enterprises, and actually, these people are meeting for the first time on a call to learn how this all works together. But I want to emphasize that the goal here with something like Instana is not to help the Mickey persona do what Jim's job is, or Jim to do Mickey's job. We want to make sure that the two different personas can work together better, so they can have a smoother experience for their customers. So let's take a look at really how this plays out. Often enterprises will spend thousands, millions of dollars, millions of pounds to instrument their applications with an APM tool. And I'll show an example of this in a minute, but really they get to a black box when it comes to the mainframe. The transaction flows through from where it starts on a web front end, or a mobile application, gets driven through various levels of services, and then ultimately needs to call the mainframe to update a database. And if the person responsible for the overall application sees that the slowdown is coming from the mainframe, they really have no indication of where to start or narrow down the problem. They just see it's slow in the mainframe. And so what often happens is that either they call up the person who they last dealt with a mainframe problem, or they pull everyone together into a war room situation. So you get the MQ guys, you get the DBAs, you get the IMS people, you get the KICS people together. And it's a lot of toing and froing, a lot of time wasted for many of the people to actually show that, no, they're not responsible for this, so that it must be someone else. So in this case, MQ looks okay, IMS guy is denying his responsibility, and ultimately we get to the point where we go, okay, we're able to spot that actually there might be something in KICS that we need to look at here. And all of this finger pointing is not great, probably gets executive focus as well, and it's an inefficient way to resolve the problem. It's not good from a business perspective, because it may be that your application is performing poorly and giving a substandard experience to your customers. So if we start to think about when we have something like Instana in here with mainframe visibility in here, we now start to see that the application owner or the SRE is able to look at the same issue, but actually start to, when we see the problem stemming from the mainframe, we can have a much greater level of visibility that, okay, this time the problem is in KICS, and she'll be able to reach out to the appropriate SME straight away, not calling in others, and potentially give a head start on where the problem is located, because she may have some identifying details, such as a region name or a task ID or a user ID that that is being impacted or is part of the symptoms. And then the SME can obviously rely on their existing tools, whether that's a Megamon or another monitor, in order to deep dive into the problem, to discover, okay, yes, actually there was a looping task and we needed to purge that to release a connection to a database, or whatever the issue might be there. What I just want to reemphasize here is that, again, we're not trying to make the application owner team or the broad SREs a group of mainframe experts, and we're not trying to replace traditional mainframe tools here, because you have those for the deep dive and taking the appropriate action. What we are trying to enable here is that both sides of the organization can work better together. So with that, I am going to do a quick demo of Instana and showing you some of the mainframe details. So fingers crossed this goes okay. So hopefully now you can see this is the front page of Instana, one of our demo systems. What I'm going to start with is by going to look at the list of applications that are listed here. And this is we've got just a handful in here. Gives you some very basic information about what's being shown, some of the performance of the system, and what Instana thinks the current health of the system is. I'm going to look at an application that we have within this demo environment called Hybrid, and it's a simple application that's calling in from outside the mainframe through ZOS Connect into Kix and beyond there. So if I click on this, then I'm able to look at a summary view of the application, which is showing you how things have been performing recently, the number of calls that are being taken place over the past hour or so. If there's been any particular problems, any erroneous calls that have occurred, how many of those may have been slow or deliverable, causing a problem, which services within the environment is being used, so which Kix regions, and we'll take a closer look at that in there as well, processor time, and if there are any kind of slowdowns and spikes in terms of latency there. So very quick high-level view to understand how this application is performing. So I'm going to look now at the services tab, and this is giving me a list of all of the different services, components that are being run within this application. So we're now at the scope to just this particular app that we're looking at, and you can see there's some traditional kind of cloud orchestrated, container orchestrated systems out there. We've got a Nginx there, we've got a Tomcat server, there's a MySQL MongoDB there that's being used by this application. But you can also see that we have some Z components here. We can see there's obviously got some Kix regions here. There's a DB2 here. There's a ZOS Connect instance that's been looked at, and all of these have been seen to be part of this application at some point by Instana. So how are all these identified? So obviously we haven't spent the whole time setting up a very complex manual instrumentation of these systems. What we've actually done is there are agents across the system that are picking up information as we go through. But from a configuration point of view, this is fairly straightforward. We defined our application, and then we defined, what's the starting point of the application? Where does the request come in? And in this example, we've defined this Nginx environment as the starting point. So as calls come in through that system, we're starting to track them with Instana. And we've also said we want to make sure that for this particular application, we want to track all downstream services. So Any request that comes through, we consider it part of the Z hybrid application here. We could do more complex configurations so that only certain flows would be considered part of this application. And just to keep it simple, we've also taken a look at all calls that come through there. So what does that actually look like? And I spoke earlier about understanding what an environment looks like, so you can actually understand where the flow of information is. And here it is. It's not a particularly complex application, but you can see here's on the far left here, here's our Nginx starting point, and all the requests are getting routed through to this Tomcat server, and then they go off to various different places too. So here you can see that there are flows going into this ZOS Connect, and then from ZOS Connect sitting there converting, the API call into I think it'd probably be Kix COBOL copybook into this particular first Kix region, which then routes the requests through to other things, and obviously we see a request also hitting this DB2 as well. So what would that have looked like without this instrumentation here? Because obviously this is very helpful because we understand, there's a request that would go through all of this and ultimately end up in these little lines, or hopefully you can see, the flow of the data there gives a little indication of how they don't represent every single transaction, but they represent sort of like the frequency of transactions. So the faster you see that the nodes go through, I think that actually shows more transactions are going across a particular flow point. If we didn't have this, so this is what, if we didn't have the mainframe visibility, so going back to the original scenario, we had the instrumentation across the containerized workloads on these Linux servers here. It's going through, and then we can see the request is going, some's going to that MySQL database, but then we just see this box said WLAG, and that's the host name. That's actually the host name of our mainframe system. So we can see that the request is going in there, and all the calls are going there, but we really have no idea what's going on in there. We don't know if it's calling MQ, whether it's calling Kix, IMS, DB2, what the different flows within that. It's very much a black box at the end of the day. So we now have this view of all of the flows here, and we now can see the flow of the application within our Kix region. So what happens if we have a problem or want to take a closer look at a particular service that's on the system? So let's start by hovering over Kix region. It'll give me the details of the total number of calls, erroneous calls, and latency of that particular system at a high level. If there was a problem that's been determined, because Instana has learned what is normal for the application, and then color code it if there's real deviation from that expected performance, we can go and have a look at that. So I'm going to just look at the analytics for this particular Kix region here, and it's now just filtering it down on the Kix side, and we're able to see what requests are being made here. And you can see basic information about what is being called. So if I go and take another look at and drill down a little bit further, we can look at the Kix calls here and each of the individual calls, and we can see that some of them are highlighting that there's some errors. And we can go down and take a closer look at what that particular call was doing and when it occurred. So this was considered an erroneous call, and something went wrong when it was called, and tells me the flow of how it got here, and then what was actually being called as it happened. This responded back very quickly with a particular problem, and we can look at a stack trace of the issue here. And we can see the error code, there's a service error, there's a stack trace, and also some details about the particular system that was being covered here. So we can see in basic information about the Kix system that was being used here. So we've got the task number, we've got the region number, we've also got the append code as well, that came through. So this is actually really helpful because we have been able to spot a particular error. We've been able to get some very basic information. And if this was a persistent problem or something considered severe enough, we know that we can focus in on kicks as the area to focus, as the area to investigate. We have some basic information that we could go and share with Jim, our kicks subject matter expert. And we can say, hey, you know, Jim, we've seen some problems with kicks CB07. You can find some information about task number 88777. We've already given Jim a real head start in terms of what he can do with his investigation. He can go into his Omegamon front end and he can go and start to look at that particular problem. Maybe there's something wrong with the region. Maybe it's short on storage. We've got an error code here that there was a server error. So we can start to investigate what those particular errors are. And we've not had to call a war room situation. We've not had to call in the MQ guy and the IMS or the DB2 guy onto this. So we've got very, very focused straight away in terms of where we should be focusing our analysis. And all of that's taken much quicker amount of time than we would traditionally would have had to deal with. So that was just a quick overview of the Instana interface and some of the things that we can do there.
So my screen.
I'm just going to go back to slide 7. So that's hopefully been a quick whistle-stop tour around why observability is really important now within our hybrid cloud applications. How important the mainframe needs to be as part of this, because without that view into the mainframe, you're only seeing part of the picture. So it's critical that mainframe teams are considered part of the hybrid application story. It's important that people who are looking at it at that high level have an appreciation that the mainframe is going to need to be a part of the visibility, part of the observability capabilities within there. But it's also very important that as they bring all this together, a solution is selected that gives you that brings in a lot of the capabilities that are required from a modern APM solution, such as the automated discovery, the real-time context, the intelligent action that's taking place there. And as we build this out, certainly within Instana, you will see more and more topology flows that are being delivered in that, closer integration with metrics from other parts of the mainframe, so that the user of Instana can have a richer view of what the mainframe is doing. And ultimately, when problems are detected, they are accurately detected. The root cause and the context is identified quickly, and the right subject matter experts can be engaged faster to deliver the fix or the resolution that's required before it affects the business in terms of productivity or customer satisfaction. So with that, that's the end of my session today. Hopefully it's been useful to you. If you want to learn any more, please do reach out to me. My email's on the front page. I would also appreciate your feedback on what you thought about this session. Yeah, if you have any questions, we've got time to address them now.
Okay, Chris, so there's no questions in the chat. Just a reminder that this is session 3AW. Just to let you know, this is session 3AW.
3AW. Okay, well, don't read what I say there.
I think this was, you set the sessions up before, the slides up before you swapped everything around. So I think you've got the wrong one on there. Yeah, today, so this would be 3AW.
Yes, it does say 3AW on the front, isn't it? So
a minor detail. anybody has got any questions, you can of course send them to Chris, and please, when you do the feedback, just notice that the length of session question requires a 5 as the perfect answer, not a 9. That's way too long. And remember the charities, donate, both because they're good causes, but also in appreciation of today's speakers. My applause.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And it was pretty interesting. It was nice to see that you don't have to sit and work out all the different connective points. That's always a bit of a bugbear. All right.
Did we lose everyone very early on, or?
I'm sorry, Chris, I missed what you said.
So how did we do? Did we lose our attendee early on, or?
We did.
Okay.
Almost before we started speaking, but not to worry, because obviously the slides can all be downloaded. You've uploaded them onto the website, I guess, and of course people can watch the recording, which is also good. And well done that the live demo worked.
There you go. So I got some practice in, because I want to
Yeah.
do that. Yeah.
It'll not be the last time you do that, I'm sure.
No, probably tomorrow. I think I'm going to do it again. Okay.
All right then.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
very
your time,
much.
Chris.
All right.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.